Her son moved in his wife and children, without asking. The mother didn't raise her voice. She called the realtor, listed the farmhouse, and signed the deed without warning. By the time her daughter-in-law saw the lock was changed, the sale had closed. They thought being family gave them rights. She showed them what ownership really means. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The gravel popped beneath Joanne Mercer's tires as her old Ford eased up the long drive, dust pluming in the afternoon light. She'd spent the weekend selling quilts and lavender sachets at the county craft fair, a quiet 2 days she'd earned after a hard harvest. Now, as she crested the hill, she saw something that stopped her breath halfway in her throat. A silver Dodge parked crooked by her porch. For a long moment she just sat there with the engine running. The familiar silhouette of her son's car felt like an intrusion, a noise in what had always been her silence. The fields rolled golden around her, the same fields she and her late husband, Wayne, had worked for 40 years. This place had never looked foreign. Until now. She killed the engine. The ticking sound of cooling metal filled the air. Her hands, rough and freckled, tightened on the steering wheel. "What on earth?" she muttered, but the words went nowhere. The porch light was on, even though it was barely past 4. When she stepped onto the porch, the boards creaked under her boots. The front door, her door, was already cracked open. A faint scent of vanilla candle drifted out, mixed with the sharper note of cleaning spray. Inside, boxes were stacked high against the foyer wall, U-Haul boxes marked in black marker. Kitchen, bedroom, toys. Toys? She took one step in. The house sounded different, fuller, busier. Somewhere down the hall, she heard a laugh she recognized but didn't want to. In the living room, Kendra was tugging at Joanne's curtains, humming under her breath. The floral pattern of the drapes, the same ones Joanne had sewn herself back in '92, hung limply in her daughter-in-law's hands. "Oh!" Kendra startled when she saw her. "Joanne, you're home early." Joanne didn't move. Her keys dangled between her fingers, catching the light. "I didn't realize I needed to call ahead," she said quietly. Before Kendra could stammer an answer, Troy stepped in from the kitchen, holding a sweating glass of sweet tea like he owned the place. He had that same easy grin he'd had since high school, the one that always preceded bad news. "Hey, Mom," he said, spreading his arms like she'd just walked into a surprise party. "Figured you wouldn't mind. The lease was up at our place, and this old house was just sitting here." "Just sitting here," she repeated, her voice steady but sharp enough to cut through his grin. Troy set the glass down on the mantel. "It's family, Mom. It's all in the family. Thought we'd get a head start fixing things up. You know, freshen it a little. Maybe repaint the upstairs." Kendra smoothed the curtain hem, not meeting Joanne's eyes. "We've been talking about making it feel homey again. You deserve some help around here." Joanne took in the scene, the half-emptied moving boxes, the blanket draped over her late husband's recliner, a new framed photo of Troy's kids already on the mantel beside Wayne's old pocket knife. Every inch of her house had been quietly claimed. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but she didn't shout. She'd learned long ago that silence could say more than anger. She set her purse on the entry table and took off her jacket with deliberate calm. "Did you call first?" she asked, looking from one to the other. Troy chuckled, the sound hollow. "You weren't here, and it just made sense, Mom. You've been talking about downsizing and, well, Kendra and I figured this place should stay in the family." Kendra added softly, "We'll take good care of it. Promise." Joanne stepped closer until the distance between them shrank to a fragile arm's length. "You figured," she repeated. Her gaze shifted to the window, her window, where the fields beyond swayed golden and endless, her land, her life, the house Wayne had built nail by nail. The keys felt heavy in her palm. Troy laughed again, trying to cut the tension. "You're not mad, are you? We're family. It's not like you'd throw us out." The wind rattled the screen door behind her. Somewhere in the barn, a loose panel banged against the siding like a slow heartbeat. Joanne slid the keys into her pocket and turned toward the staircase, scanning the boxes that lined the walls. Her home felt smaller, invaded, rearranged without permission. "No," she said finally, her tone unreadable. "I'm not mad." Troy relaxed, his smile widening, until he saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. The kind of quiet, deliberate calm that always meant she'd already started thinking. Joanne looked around one last time, the faint hum of Kendra's tune filling the air again. Then she turned for the front door, her boots echoing on the old wood floors. Outside, the sun was sinking low, gilding the cornfields in copper light. Joanne paused at the porch rail, watching her son's car gleam in her driveway like a trespasser. She touched the metal key ring in her pocket, the one thing in this house that still felt like hers. And with a slow breath, she whispered to herself, "Not yet. But you'll wish you'd asked." The night air hung thick and warm when Joanne locked herself in the small office at the back of the farmhouse. The room smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil, the way Wayne had liked it. Dust drifted through the narrow beam of light from her desk lamp, floating like slow ash. She sank into the chair, the old oak creaking under her. Outside the window, the barn lights glowed faintly through the trees. Troy's doing, probably, rummaging around like the place already belonged to him. Her jaw flexed, but she kept her breathing even. She reached under the desk and pulled out the heavy tin lockbox that had lived there since 1983. The metal was cool, its corners dented from decades of being shoved under tax folders and feed invoices. She slid in the key, twisted. The latch gave a tired click. Inside lay the paper life of the farm. Insurance slips, old tax forms, Wayne's will. Beneath them, the deed, folded into thirds, worn soft at the creases. Joanne laid it flat on the desk, smoothing it with both hands. The paper had yellowed a little, but her name, Joanne Lynn Mercer, was still inked in clean black print at the bottom line. Just hers. She stared at it for a long while, her reflection faintly mirrored in the glossy surface of the glass lamp. The quiet inside the office deepened until she could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock and the hum of cicadas outside. She remembered that spring after Wayne passed, how she'd sat in this very chair, signing refinance papers with trembling fingers, trying to keep the farm afloat. The banker had asked then if she wanted to add Troy. "Makes things simpler down the road," he'd said. But she'd refused. She'd known even then how Troy thought about inheritance. Wayne used to call it Mercer pride, the good kind that kept a man working. But in Troy, it had soured into entitlement. Somewhere between the college loan she'd paid off and the second car he'd demanded, that pride had turned rotten. Joanne reached for the phone on the corner of the desk. The base was chipped, the cord coiled and stubborn. She dialed a number she hadn't used in months. 2 rings, then a familiar voice answered, warm and slow. "Eli Drummond speaking." "Eli," she said, voice steady. "It's Joanne Mercer." "Well, I'll be. Haven't heard from you since Wayne's auction. Everything all right out your way?" She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the window again, catching a flash of light, a porch lamp switching off. "Depends how you define all right," she said. Eli's tone shifted, years of real estate instinct kicking in. "Talk to me." "My son moved his family into my farmhouse. No notice. No permission." A low whistle came through the line. "That right?" "Mm-hmm. Says it's family property." Eli chuckled dryly. "Ah, that old song." "I've got the deed right here," she said, her fingers brushing the paper again. "My name's the only one on it. always has been. He didn't speak for a moment, just breathed. Then, quietly, "Then it's yours, Joanne. If it's yours, it's yours. Doesn't matter who's sleeping under that roof right now." The weight of those words sank in, solid as the foundation of the house itself. For the first time all evening, her shoulders loosened a little. "Good," she murmured. "That's all I needed to hear." "Want me to come by tomorrow?" Eli offered. "We can look things over, make sure everything's buttoned up legal-like." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "Early." When she hung up, the office felt sharper, cleaner somehow. She tucked the deed back into the lockbox and slid it beneath the desk again, closing the latch with a soft click. From the hallway, a faint creak sounded, footsteps on the floorboards. Troy's voice carried, low and half-laughing, saying something to Kendra. Joanne froze, listening, until their door shut. She stood, turned off the lamp, and opened the office window just an inch. The cool Ohio night poured in, carrying the smell of corn and cut grass. Out in the darkness, the porch light flickered once before going out entirely. Joanne stayed there a long time, hand resting on the window frame. The house had gone quiet again, but not peaceful. There was something in the air now. A shift, small but irreversible. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, Joanne whispered to the empty room, "They think it's already theirs." Her gaze hardened. "They don't know me at all." The next morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of Ohio sky that promised rain but couldn't quite commit. Joanne's truck hummed down Route 22, wipers clicking against a fine mist. The air smelled of damp hay and diesel, and she could still feel the stiffness in her shoulders from last night's discovery. She parked outside Rita's Feed and Cafe, a squat brick building with hand-painted signs and a row of tractors visible from the window. The place hadn't changed in 20 years. Same chipped mugs, same counter stools, same clock that ran 5 minutes slow. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped in. Eli Drummond was already there, sitting in the corner booth by the window, his Stetson on the seat beside him, and a legal pad spread across the table. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Morning, Joe. You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," she said, sliding in across from him. Her coffee arrived before she asked. Rita knew her order by heart. Rita Boone herself came over with a pot in hand, her apron dusted with flour. "You want eggs or just caffeine and bad decisions today?" "Just caffeine," Joanne muttered. Rita snorted and poured. "That's what I thought." She glanced at Eli's paperwork, then at Joanne. "You finally doing something about that boy of yours?" Joanne's jaw twitched, but her voice stayed even. "Thinking about it." Rita leaned one hip against the table. "If it were me, I'd evict him like raccoons. Set a trap, bait it with Wi-Fi and beer, and haul him out by morning." Eli chuckled, flipping a page. "That's one way." Joanne stared into her coffee, the dark surface trembling slightly in her hand. "No, not like that," she said. Quietly. Rita raised a brow. "Quietly? I don't want a scene. I don't want to fight. I want them gone before they even realize what's happening." Eli nodded slowly, scribbling a few notes. "You're talking a private listing. No MLS, no signs in the yard." "Exactly," Joanne said. "Means I'll have to vet buyers myself. But if you're serious, Joe, we can start today." Across the diner, a couple of farmers argued over seed prices, the clink of forks punctuating their talk. Outside, rain began to tap softly against the window pane. Rita shook her head, muttering, "That boy's gonna blow his top when he finds out." Joanne looked up, meeting her friend's eyes. "He already has. Just hasn't noticed yet." Eli smiled faintly. "That's the Joe I remember. Always 3 moves ahead." She didn't smile back, just pushed her cup aside. "You'll handle everything?" "Discretion's my middle name," he said. "You sure you're ready to let it go?" Her gaze drifted out the window. to the faint reflection of herself framed in the glass, gray hair pulled back, eyes sharper than she remembered. "Wayne built that place," she murmured. "But he left it to me, and I'll decide when it stops being home." The bell over the door rang again. A burst of wind swept in as a delivery man brought in a crate of feed. Joanne barely noticed. Her phone buzzed against the table, screen lighting up with a text. Troy. "Hey, where's the lawnmower key? Need to trim the west field before lunch." Her thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, she considered replying. Then she locked the phone and set it face down beside her coffee. Eli caught the motion. "Everything okay?" "Just noise," she said. He nodded. "Then we'll start with an off-market appraisal. I'll come by this afternoon. We'll keep it between us." Rita leaned closer. "You sure you don't want me to let something slip around town? A little gossip might make him nervous." Joanne shook her head. "No gossip. No warning. When it happens clean." Rita whistled low. "Cold-blooded, Joe. Didn't think you had it in you." Joanne looked down at her untouched coffee, then back at her two oldest friends. "You live long enough with people assuming you'll bend," she said softly, "and you start wondering how it feels to be the one who doesn't." Rain thickened outside, turning the diner windows to fogged glass. Eli capped his pen, his notes now covered in firm, careful handwriting. "All right," he said. "Quiet it is." Joanne nodded once, reaching for her coat. As she stood, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Troy. She didn't look this time. She slid the phone into her pocket like it was just another receipt, something meant to be thrown away. Outside, the air had cooled, the fields blurring into a soft gray mist. She walked to her truck, rain speckling her shoulders. Before she climbed in, she looked back, through the diner window. Eli was already on the phone, Rita refilling cups like nothing monumental had just been set in motion. Joanne closed the truck door, turned the key, and whispered to herself, "They won't hear a damn thing until it's done." Morning sunlight spilled across the gravel road like a sheet of gold, glinting off puddles from last night's rain. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of wet corn stalks and diesel from a passing tractor. Joanne stood at the edge of her property, hands in her pockets, as Eli Drummond's white pickup rolled to a stop beside her mailbox. He climbed out, adjusting his cap, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Still the prettiest stretch in Fairfield County," he said, looking over the fields. Joanne's gaze followed his. Acres of land her husband had coaxed into life, soil that still remembered their sweat. "You always did know how to sweet-talk a farm," she said. He grinned. "Helps when I mean it." They started down the gravel lane together, boots crunching in rhythm. The grass along the fence line sparkled with dew, and a red-tailed hawk circled high overhead. Eli paused now and then to jot notes on his clipboard or raise his phone, snapping photos of the barn and silo. "Roof looks solid," he murmured, framing another shot. "You could get a good number just on the outbuildings alone, and that pond in the back adds charm." "Charm," Joanne echoed dryly. "That what they call 40 years of upkeep?" He chuckled. "That's what buyers call it when they want to pay less." She almost smiled, but didn't. They walked farther down until the wind shifted, carrying a whiff of hay and something fainter, smoke from a breakfast fire inside the house. Her house. From the porch, she could just make out Kendra's floral robe moving past the screen door. A children's cartoon voice spilled faintly into the air. The sight made something twist low in Joanne's gut. Not rage this time, but a kind of bone-deep resolve. Eli lowered his camera. "You sure you want me taking photos while they're here?" "I'm sure," Joanne said. "Let them think I'm showing the place off. They won't ask questions. They never ask." He gave her a long look, one brow raised but didn't argue. "All right then." They circled the barn. Eli crouching to snap close-ups of the stone foundation and old Mercer Farm sign still hanging crooked above the door. When he stood, he brushed dust from his jeans. "We'll list it as off-market," he said. "Private circulation, cash-ready buyers only. You'll have a choice before Troy even knows what I've done." "Good," Joanne said simply. Eli pulled a slim folder from his clipboard. "All I need's your signature. It's not a sale. Not yet. Just authorization to market discreetly." She took the pen. The page fluttered in the soft wind as she signed her name. Joanne Lynn Mercer. Steady and clear. Same as on the deed. Each stroke felt like nailing down a piece of herself before someone else could claim it. When she handed the papers back, Eli nodded, satisfied. "I'll file everything today. Marlene at the assessor's office still owes me a favor. I'll have her verify your ownership's clean." "Tell her to make it airtight," Joanne said. He smiled. "Always do." A car door slammed behind them. They both turned to see Troy stepping onto the porch, phone in hand. His tone was loud and easy, careless. "Hey, Mom, Kendra wants to know if we can set up a coop out back. Maybe 6 or 7 chickens? Won't bother anything." Joanne's pulse tightened. Chickens. Of course Kendra wanted chickens. Another piece of ground they'd claim. Another nail in the illusion that they belonged here. She called back. "We'll talk later, Troy." Her voice even, almost pleasant. He waved her off and went back inside, already talking into his phone again. Eli whistled low. "They're settling in fast." "That's what squatters do," Joanne said. For a moment neither spoke. Only the wind moved, rippling through the fields and lifting the edge of her flannel collar. Eli slipped the signed papers into his folder. "I'll call once Marlene confirms the records. Shouldn't take more than an hour." "Thanks," she said. "And Eli, keep this quiet. Not a word to anyone, not even Rita." He tipped his cap. "You have my word." She watched as his truck rumbled away down the lane, the dust rising behind it like a curtain closing. The house stood silent now, framed in sunlight, her son's car still gleaming smugly in the driveway. Joanne turned back toward the barn, eyes narrowing. Somewhere inside, a drip echoed off the tin roof, steady and patient. She could almost feel the rhythm of it in her chest. Time passing, chances closing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text from Troy. "So, about those chickens? Kendra's already picking breeds." Joanne stared at the message for a long time. Then she powered off the phone completely and slid it into her jacket. Her lips curved, not a smile exactly, but something close. "They'll find out soon enough," she whispered. "And when they do..." Her gaze lifted to the endless stretch of sky above her fields. "They won't even see it coming." By late afternoon, the heat had settled heavy across the fields, a syrup-thick quiet broken only by the low drone of cicadas. Joanne sat in the shade of the front porch, a sweating glass of lemonade resting against her palm. The condensation traced a ring on the armrest, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock she alone could hear. Across the yard, Troy reclined in Wayne's old chair, boots crossed at the ankles, sunglasses perched cockily on his nose. He held his phone out, turning it to catch the sunlight as if he were taking inventory of his kingdom. "You know what I was thinking?" he began, tapping the porch rail with his finger. "We could knock out that side shed and build a patio. Maybe string some Edison lights. Kendra's got a whole Pinterest board going." Joanne said nothing. She took another sip of lemonade, her gaze drifting past him toward the cornfields, swaying under the weight of summer. Troy leaned forward, oblivious. "And the barn. Man, if we cleaned it up, it could be a venue. Weddings, reunions, that kind of thing. Easy side income." Her eyes flicked to him briefly, her expression unreadable. "Weddings." "Yeah," he said brightly. "Rustic charm sells. People love the whole farm aesthetic." She tipped her glass again, the ice clinking. Funny how people love what they didn't earn. He didn't catch the barb, too busy scrolling through his phone. Down by the fence line, Kendra appeared in cut-off shorts and sneakers, tape measure in hand. She was muttering numbers under her breath, walking a rectangle across the yard. Joanne watched her pace it out, methodical as a surveyor. Kendra caught her eye and smiled sweetly. Thinking a pool might fit right here. Maybe a kidney shape. Nothing too flashy. Joanne swirled the ice in her glass. Pools need permits. Oh, sure, Kendra said, waving it off. But that's easy enough once the paperwork's in our name. Joanne's grip tightened around the glass. The lemon slice shifted with a soft splash. In whose name? She asked. Kendra blinked, hesitated, then laughed. Ours, I mean. Family name. You know what I meant. Joanne didn't answer. She rose from her chair, set the half-empty glass on the porch railing, and walked inside. Her pulse thudded, but her steps stayed measured. She'd learned how to let anger settle, how to turn it into something useful. When she emerged again an hour later, Eli's truck was pulling up the drive. He climbed out, tucking a folder under his arm, the smell of dust and gasoline following him. Hope I'm not catching you in the middle of family bonding, he said dryly. Joanne's mouth curved. You're right on time. They started toward the far field, the one that stretched beyond the silo. The evening light had gone honey-soft, pouring over the corn like molten gold. A breeze lifted strands of Joanne's hair, carrying the hum of crickets and the faint sound of Kendra talking about pool liners somewhere behind them. Eli adjusted his cap and looked out over the rows. Soil's in good shape, he said, crouching to pinch a handful. You kept this land alive, Joe. Not many around here could have done that after Wayne passed. She didn't answer, watching him rub the dirt between his fingers, loose and rich. Premium soil, he continued. Prime interest. You could name your price, honestly. Her arms folded. You mean people are asking? He straightened, giving her that quiet, knowing look. I mean people are offering. Something in her chest flickered, a spark she hadn't expected so soon. Already? Eli pulled a folded document from his pocket. Got a call this morning, couple out of Columbus. They saw my private listing and moved fast. Full cash offer, no contingencies. Joanne blinked. The wind lifted the hem of her shirt, cool against the sweat on her neck. For a heartbeat, the world felt oddly still, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. She turned her gaze toward the house. From the porch, she could see Troy stretching in Wayne's chair, glass of tea in hand, oblivious to the invisible tide about to pull beneath him. A full cash offer, she said slowly. Clean as it gets, Eli confirmed. They'll close quick, too. You'd walk away free and clear before your boy knows what hit him. Joanne looked out at the fields again. The stalks whispered against each other, restless in the evening wind. She let the words sink in, free and clear. Her fingers brushed over the calluses of her palms, reminders of every season she and Wayne had sweated through. Then she nodded once, the motion small but absolute. Do it, she said. Eli studied her for a moment. You sure? Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the setting sun bled into copper and violet streaks. I've never been sure. Behind them, laughter drifted from the porch, Troy's, easy and careless, cutting through the air like a knife. Joanne didn't turn. Her face was calm, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's see how much my piece is worth. Eli tucked the offer back into his folder, eyes narrowing slightly, as if he could already see the storm forming. And as they started back toward the house, the light dimming around them, Joanne felt something settle deep inside her chest. Not guilt, not grief. Something colder, steadier. The sound of Kendra's laughter rose again, bright and unguarded. Joanne kept walking, the dirt soft beneath her boots. They think it's theirs, she thought. but it never was. The next morning dawned cool and silver, the kind of quiet that came before harvest, a deceptive peace. Joanne stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into her favorite chipped mug when her phone buzzed against the counter. Eli Drummond. She wiped her hands on a dish towel before answering. "Morning," she said. "Got news," he replied. His voice carried a restrained excitement, the kind that belonged to a man who'd seen too many deals fall apart and still knew a solid one when it came through. "Your buyers signed the letter of intent, full amount. They want a 30-day close." Joanne exhaled, slow and steady. The farmhouse clock ticked above her head, marking the moment everything started to shift for good. 30 days, she repeated. "That's right," Eli said. "I'll send over the agreement this afternoon. You'll need to start sorting what you want to keep. They're offering to buy the furniture, too, if you'd rather walk away clean." Her eyes drifted to the window. Out by the barn, Troy was bent over a lawnmower, kicking at it with irritation while one of his kids tugged at his pant leg. "I'll take care of it," she said. Eli hesitated. "You okay, Joe?" She smiled faintly into the receiver. "Never better." By noon, Joanne was at Lancaster Mini Storage, signing paperwork under the flicker of a buzzing fluorescent light. The clerk, barely 20, bored, chewing gum, handed her a set of keys on a plastic tag. "Unit 37, left row, all yours." The drive back to the farm felt lighter somehow. She'd brought a stack of boxes from the feed store and spent the afternoon quietly filling them. Family photos first. Wayne's old Polaroids, the black and white wedding portrait that had hung above the mantel for 40 years. Then came the little things that no one else would understand. The recipe cards in her mother's handwriting, the brass horse figurine from the county fair, Wayne's pocket knife with the worn bone handle. Every box she taped shut made the air inside the house feel thinner. The walls seemed to hum with absence already, as if the place could sense what was coming. Out on the porch, Troy's voice cut through the calm. "Mom!" Joanne set the tape roll down and walked to the doorway. He stood by the barn, sweat darkening his t-shirt. "Did you lock this again?" he called, tugging at the padlock on the double doors. "Kendra wanted to move some stuff in there." "I did," Joanne said. "Well, could you not?" He threw up his hands. "It's a barn, Mom, not Fort Knox." Joanne crossed her arms. "Some things stay locked for a reason." Troy sighed dramatically. "You're acting like I'm a stranger here." She gave him a long, level look. "Aren't you?" He froze for a second, something uncertain flickering behind his smirk. Then he laughed it off, waving his hand. "Whatever. I'll get the bolt cutters from the garage." Joanne didn't stop him. She simply turned back inside, the corner of her mouth twitching. Not quite a smile, not yet. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the silo, Kendra stood in the yard with her phone held high, posing against the field. The glow caught her hair just right, her smile fixed in practiced perfection. Joanne watched from the porch window as Kendra typed something, laughed, and hit post. A few seconds later, Joanne's own phone buzzed with a notification. Instagram. She opened it. The photo was bright and golden. Kendra, framed by the barn and the endless Ohio sky. The caption read, "Farm life forever. Blessed. Chalk Mercer Homestead." Joanne's thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, she almost laughed. Instead, she set the phone down and poured herself another glass of lemonade. Through the window, she could see her son stretched in Wayne's old chair again, sipping beer, the kids running through the yard like they'd grown up there, the life they thought they were inheriting. She took a long sip, the tartness of lemon biting through the quiet. Her phone buzzed again. It was Eli, texting a single line. "Contract confirmed. They're wiring the deposit tomorrow." Joanne looked out at the fields one last time before dusk swallowed them whole. Fireflies had started to flicker along the fence, tiny sparks winking in the deepening dark. She whispered to herself, "Let them keep pretending." The glass clinked softly as she set it down beside her. "By the time they notice," she murmured, "it'll already be gone." The smell of fresh paint hit Joanne before she even reached the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't overpowering yet, just sharp enough to make her stop halfway down and glance toward the kitchen. Kendra stood on a chair, a paintbrush dripping pale yellow, humming along to country radio. The counters were covered in newspaper, a gallon can open on the table. Joanne's voice cut through the music. "What do you think you're doing?" Kendra jumped, nearly losing her balance. "Oh, Joanne! You scared me." She smiled sheepishly and gestured around. "Just brightening things up a little. The kitchen's been the same color since what, the 80s? I figured it was time for something fresher." Joanne stepped closer, her boots clicking against the tile. "Did I say you could?" Kendra hesitated, brush still in hand. "I just thought, well, we're living here now. It's our kitchen too." Joanne looked around the room, at the streaks of wet paint gleaming under the fluorescent light. The scent of it mixed with lemon cleaner and nostalgia. Wayne's hands sanding those same cabinets. The sound of late-night coffee cups clinking on this same counter. Her voice came out low and steady. "Won't be yours long enough." Kendra froze. "Excuse me?" Joanne's gaze stayed level. "You heard me." For a second neither of them spoke. The radio crackled, some old George Strait song warbling faintly in the background. Then Troy appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "What's going on?" Kendra's voice rose slightly. "Your mom doesn't want me painting the kitchen." Troy sighed, tossing the rag onto the counter. "Mom, it's just paint. She's trying to make the place nice." Joanne crossed her arms. "It was nice." He rolled his eyes. "You really need to lighten up. You've been on edge ever since we moved in. If you don't want help, just say so." "Help," Joanne repeated, her tone flat. Troy groaned and threw his hands up. "You know what? Forget it." He turned, muttering as he walked out the back door. The screen banged shut behind him. Kendra stared at Joanne for a moment longer, her face caught somewhere between irritation and confusion. "I don't understand you," she said finally, then set the brush down and followed her husband outside. When the kitchen went quiet, Joanne stood still for a long moment, the faint buzz of the radio filling the silence. Then she reached for the paint can, pried the lid back on, and carried it out to the mudroom. The smell lingered like a warning. Later that afternoon, Joanne met Rita Boone out by the edge of the South Field. The feed store cafe owner had driven her old Chevy pickup down the back road, bringing 2 thermoses of coffee and her usual blunt wisdom. "You look like you're about to bury a body," Rita said, handing her a cup. Joanne smirked faintly. "Wouldn't waste good soil." Rita laughed. "That's the spirit." She glanced toward the farmhouse, visible in the distance, Troy's truck in the drive, Kendra's floral curtains fluttering in the kitchen window. "They're still nesting, huh?" "Like termites," Joanne muttered. They walked the fence line together, the corn rustling beside them. Rita kept her hands in her jacket pockets, listening as Joanne filled her in on Eli's progress. The buyers, the offer, the 30-day close. Rita let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually did it." "Almost," Joanne said. "You gonna tell them before or after they find the moving trucks in the yard?" Joanne took a sip of her coffee, the bitterness grounding her. "After. Always after." Rita grinned, shaking her head. "You've got more steel in you than anyone gives you credit for, Joe." "People see what they want to see," Joanne said. "They stopped looking a long time ago." That evening, just as the last streaks of sunlight bled over the horizon, Joanne's phone buzzed. An email from Eli Drummond. Paperwork finalized. Title clear. Deposit received. She read it twice, her heart steady. Then she reached for the small tin lockbox on the counter. the same one that had held her deed all these years, and slipped the folded letter inside. As she closed the latch, she pulled out the ring of keys she'd kept in her pocket since Wayne's death. One for the house, one for the barn, one for the old truck that hadn't run in a decade. They clinked softly together, a sound that had once meant ownership, permanence. Now, they sounded like freedom. Outside, Troy's laughter drifted through the window again. Joanne turned off the kitchen light, the room plunging into twilight. She slid the keys into her pocket and whispered to herself, "They don't even know they've already lost." The cicadas swelled louder in the dark, as if echoing her words back across the fields. The kitchen door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Joanne didn't flinch. She was sitting at the table, a cup of black coffee cooling beside her, when Troy stormed in, face flushed, jaw tight. "You're selling my inheritance?" he barked. His voice hit the air like a hammer, sharp, entitled, echoing through the quiet house. Joanne lifted her gaze from the newspaper, folding it slowly before speaking. "It was never yours?" The words landed soft but heavy, like the thud of a gate closing. Troy's breath hitched. "What the hell does that mean? You think you can just— What? Sell the family farm behind my back?" "This isn't your farm," Joanne said, standing. Her tone was measured, calm. "It's mine. Always has been." Kendra appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Troy, what's going on?" He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on his mother. "Don't play games with me, Mom. I talked to Rita at the cafe. She said Eli's been around, taking photos, paperwork, something about a buyer. You went behind our backs." Joanne exhaled, slow and deliberate. So Rita had slipped. Not intentionally, Rita's loyalty was solid, but gossip had its own legs in a small town. Troy took a step closer. "You can't sell what's already promised to your son." "Promised?" Joanne repeated, her brow lifting. "Promised by who?" He blinked, thrown. "By you. You always said the farm would stay in the family." "I said it would stay with someone who respected it," she said. "That's not the same thing." Kendra crossed her arms, voice sharpening. "This is insane. You can't just throw your family out, Joanne. You're not thinking straight." Joanne moved to the counter, her back to them as she opened the drawer where she kept the tin lockbox. The faint metallic clink filled the tense silence. She set the box on the table, slid the key in, and turned it. "Since you're both so confused," she said, pulling out a folded document, "let's settle this." Troy stared at it, disbelieving. "What's that?" "The deed," Joanne said simply. She unfolded it with practiced care, smoothing the creases with her palm. "You wanted proof. Here it is." He snatched it from her hands, scanning the text. His eyes darted down the page, searching for something that wasn't there. There was only one name, Joanne Lynn Mercer. His voice faltered. "You never added me?" "No." The single syllable landed cold and clean between them. Kendra stepped forward, peering over his shoulder. "You're saying you left him out? Your own son?" Joanne met her eyes. "I didn't leave him out. I never put him in." For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Then Troy slammed the paper down on the table. "You're unbelievable." Joanne crossed her arms. "No, Troy, I'm prepared." He laughed once, harshly. "You think you can just sell everything out from under us and walk away?" "I don't think it," she said. "I know it." The look he gave her wasn't confusion anymore. It was betrayal, the kind that came from a man who'd mistaken possession for love. "You don't mean that," he said finally, his voice cracking. "You'd throw your own family out for money?" "I'd trade anything," Joanne said quietly, "for peace." Kendra's eyes flashed. "You're bitter. That's what this is. You lost Wayne, and now you want to punish everyone else." Joanne's voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than shouting ever could. Wayne worked this land until his heart gave out. He left it to me because he knew what you'd do with it. And you've proven him right." Troy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the deed again, his hands shaking. Finally, he said, "You can't stop me from fighting this. There are laws." "There are," Joanne said, stepping closer. "And they're all on my side." Kendra reached for her husband's arm. "Troy." But he jerked away, his face tight with fury. "I'll talk to a lawyer. You'll regret this." Joanne turned her back to them, pouring the cold coffee into the sink. "Maybe, but not as much as you will." For a moment, all three stood in silence. The mother, the son, the daughter-in-law, like actors frozen between acts. Then Troy crumpled the deed in his hand and stormed out, slamming the screen door so hard the hinges groaned. Kendra lingered, glaring daggers. "You'll be alone, you know," she said. "No one wants to grow old alone." Joanne wiped her hands on a towel and looked her dead in the eye. "I already am." Kendra's lips parted, but no words came. She followed Troy out, the echo of their footsteps fading down the porch. Joanne stood still for a long moment, the room humming with leftover anger. Then she walked back to the table and smoothed the deed flat again, her fingers steady. Through the window, the sun was setting behind the barn, throwing long shadows across the field. Somewhere outside, a door slammed, followed by the distant sound of a truck engine revving too hard. Joanne folded the deed, placed it back into the tin box, and locked it shut. Her pulse was calm. She looked out at the drive, where dust hung in the air from Troy's tires, and whispered, almost kindly, "Run it all you want. You still can't catch what's already gone." The following Monday, the courthouse in Lancaster smelled of dust, copier toner, and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a nest of hornets as Joanne Mercer pushed open the glass door to the county assessor's office. Behind the counter, Marlene Clay looked up from her computer, squinting over the top of her reading glasses. Her gray hair was pinned back in a no-nonsense twist, a pencil stuck through it like an antenna. "Well, if it isn't Joanne Mercer," she said, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "Haven't seen you in a spell. Heard your boy's back around." Joanne stepped closer, resting her palms on the counter. "He is. That's why I'm here." Marlene's brows drew together. "Oh? I need you to pull the property record for the Mercer farm, everything tied to parcel 52E08. That got Marlene's full attention. "That your homestead on County Road 11? "The one and only." Marlene's fingers danced across the keyboard. The computer hummed, printer starting its slow grind. After a moment, she slid a crisp page across the counter. "Here it is. Still under your name." Joanne glanced down. Her name, Joanne Lynn Mercer, sat alone on the line where owner of record was printed. The space beneath it, blank and unchallenged. Marlene leaned on her elbow. "Looks clean to me. What's this about, hun?" Joanne straightened, her jaw set. "Someone's living there who shouldn't be. I need to make it official." "You talking about Troy?" Joanne's eyes flicked up. "I'm talking about tenants without rights." Marlene gave a slow whistle. "You sure you want to go that far? It'll get ugly." Joanne's voice didn't waver. "It's already ugly. I'm just setting it right." Marlene sighed and opened a drawer, pulling out a pale blue form. "Then you'll want a vacate order. You file it through the sheriff's office once your realtor verifies ownership. I can notarize the record for you." Joanne took the pen from her hand. "Let's get it done." The pen scratched steadily across the paper. Her name again, bold and decisive. When she finished, Marlene stamped it with a heavy thud that echoed across the counter. "There," Marlene said softly. "He's got 30 days, but it won't take that long once they see this." Joanne nodded, tucking the document into her purse. "Thank you, Marlene." The clerk hesitated, then added, "You're doing the right thing." Don't let anyone tell you different. That afternoon, Joanne stopped by Eli's office, a narrow brick building with the paint peeling around the windows. The bell on the door jingled as she stepped in. Eli was on the phone but waved her in, his eyes brightening when he saw the stamped form in her hand. She placed it on his desk without a word. He grinned. "You move faster than most lawyers I know. Just tired of being trespassed in my own life." He read the document quickly, then grabbed a fresh legal pad and began drafting a formal notice. "I'll file this with the sheriff's department today. Once it's logged, there's no turning back." "There never was," Joanne said. He looked up at her then, the admiration clear. "You sure you don't want me to be there when he gets it?" She shook her head. "No. He'll take it better if it comes from someone with a badge." Eli smirked. "Doubt he'll take it better, period." Joanne gave a small shrug. "He'll take it how he takes it." By sunset, she was back at the farm. The house was too quiet. Troy and Kendra had taken the kids into town, probably to vent at anyone who'd listen. Joanne carried her mug of strong coffee out to the porch and sat where she could see the driveway curve into the fields. The evening light stretched long and amber over the land, softening the edges of everything it touched. Rita Boone's truck rumbled up a few minutes later, gravel crunching under her tires. She leaned out the window. "I got your message. Spare room's clean, bed's made, and I'll put a pie in the oven if things go sideways tonight." Joanne smiled faintly. "You always were better at hospitality than me." Rita grinned. "I just don't like sleeping next to trouble." "Then keep the coffee hot," Joanne said. "Might be a long night." Rita nodded, then pulled away with a friendly honk that faded down the road. Joanne sat still, her coffee cooling in her hand, the cicadas starting their nightly chorus. The porch light flicked on automatically as dusk deepened. For the first time in months, she felt something close to steady, like the land itself had settled back into her skin. She was halfway through her cup when the gravel crunch changed tone, a heavier vehicle this time. A white county sheriff's SUV rolled slowly up the lane, its blue lights muted but flashing faintly against the trees. Joanne set her mug down, rose from the chair, and walked to the edge of the porch. The deputy climbed out, one hand on his hat brim, the other holding an envelope. His expression was neutral, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Mercer?" "Yes?" He held out the paper. "Official notice of vacancy, filed this afternoon through the assessor's office and confirmed by your realtor. You'll want to hand this directly to Mr. Troy Mercer." Joanne took it without hesitation. The envelope was thick, stamped, and sealed. She could feel the weight of consequence inside it. "Appreciate you coming out," she said. The deputy nodded. "You'll want to be around when it's served. He won't like it." "I don't imagine he will." As he turned to leave, his tires kicking up dust, Joanne stood alone again on the porch, the notice heavy in her hand. The sun had vanished behind the silo, leaving a bruised purple sky. From inside the house, the faint hum of a phone alert sounded. Troy's, forgotten on the counter. She glanced toward it, then back at the envelope. A slow smile crossed her face, tired, sure, but satisfied. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Tomorrow it's official." By sunrise, the farm had the quiet tension of a thunderstorm holding its breath. Joanne sat on the porch, the vacate notice on the table beside her coffee cup, the paper catching the early light. The dew still clung to the grass when Troy's truck roared into the drive, gravel spraying like shrapnel. He slammed the door hard enough to make the porch boards shake. "You think you can just hand me this like I'm some damn renter?" he shouted, waving the creased notice. "The sheriff handed me eviction papers. Me, your own son." Joanne looked up from her mug, unhurried. "That's what happens when you live somewhere that isn't yours." Troy's eyes were bloodshot, his jaw working like he was chewing back words. "I'm not going anywhere, you hear me? You can sell whatever you want, but you're not throwing us out." Behind him, Kendra appeared, phone in one hand, expression sharp. "I talked to a lawyer in town," she announced, her tone brittle and rehearsed. "He says you can't just kick family off shared property without due process. We'll sue if we have to." Joanne's expression didn't change. She reached for her coffee, took a sip, and said nothing. Kendra pressed on, voice rising. "You might have put your name on that paper, but this is still family land. We've invested in it now. Paint, repairs. Our money's in this house." Joanne finally spoke. "Paint doesn't buy you a title." Troy's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over. You can't just—" "It's already over," Joanne interrupted softly. She stood, her shadow cutting across the porch. "You just don't like the ending." Troy stared at her like she'd spoken another language. Kendra's eyes darted between them, calculating. When neither moved, she scoffed and spun on her heel. "Fine. Let's see what your buyers think when we tell them they're walking into a lawsuit." Joanne's voice followed her down the steps. "I imagine they'll call my attorney." That stopped Kendra mid-stride. She turned, startled. "You have an attorney?" Joanne tilted her head. "Eli called him last night." At the same time, in a small office above the hardware store, Eli Drummond sat with a man in a navy suit whose shoes were too polished for Lancaster County. The attorney's briefcase sat open between them, papers neatly stacked inside. "So they're refusing to vacate," the attorney said. "Typical. But with this order filed and the sheriff's copy served, they've got no standing. We'll fast-track enforcement." Eli leaned back, crossing his arms. "She's tougher than she looks. But I'll tell you, that boy's temper. I've seen men do worse when they think they're losing something that was never theirs." The attorney nodded. "Let's keep communication through me. Mrs. Mercer doesn't need to engage." Eli smiled faintly. "She won't. She's got more patience than God." By midweek, word had spread like spilled feed. Rita Boone's cafe buzzed with speculation. Farmers, secretaries, and the postmaster's wife all had opinions about the Mercer family showdown. "I heard Troy called the sheriff's office himself," one woman whispered over pie. "Tried to say his mama's senile." "Senile, my foot," Rita said, refilling coffee cups with a snort. "That woman could outthink a fox in a henhouse." Another farmer leaned in. "Heard she's selling to some city folks. Cash deal." Rita's lips curved. Good for her. When the conversation drifted elsewhere, she opened her ledger, jotting down a list in her neat looping script. At the top, she wrote, "Receipts, for when this blows up." Under it, she added notes. Date, time, who said what. Not because she liked gossip, but because she believed in being ready. Back at the farm, tension had thickened to something physical. Troy refused to leave, sleeping in the recliner near the front door like a watchman guarding stolen goods. Kendra stalked around with her phone glued to her hand, taking photos of everything. Cracks in the drywall, chipped paint, the broken hinge on the screen door. Evidence for a fight they couldn't win. Joanne moved through the house in silence. She packed methodically, labeling boxes for storage, ignoring their accusations, their muttering, their plans. Every night she carried another load to the shed by the driveway, the one place Troy still hadn't broken into. On Thursday morning, Eli called. "It's done," he said. "The attorney filed with the magistrate. They've got 72 hours to comply before enforcement." Joanne nodded, though he couldn't see her. 72 hours. "You okay?" "I'm ready." That evening, she sat on the porch again, the sun bleeding orange across the horizon. From inside, Troy's voice carried, low, bitter, the sound of a man losing ground. Kendra posted another photo not long after, a filtered shot of the barn at sunset with the caption, "Standing our ground, far Mercer pride." Joanne saw it pop up on her feed, glanced at it once, and set the phone face down. The cicadas hummed louder. Across the fields, headlights flickered. The sheriff's SUV slow and steady, turning off the road and into her drive. Joanne's eyes narrowed. Right on time, she murmured. She picked up her coffee and stood, the air thick with the scent of corn and coming rain. This time, she didn't plan to watch from the porch. The morning came heavy with humidity, a storm hovering just beyond the horizon. The farmhouse stood still beneath a low, bruised sky, its paint faded, curtains drawn tight. Joanne sat at the kitchen table, her coffee untouched, the mug cooling beside her folded hands. She'd been awake since dawn, listening to the house breathe its last as hers. Outside, tires crunched across gravel. The sound came slow, deliberate. A Fairfield County Sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop beside the porch. The deputy from before, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, climbed out, flanked by another officer in plain clothes and a locksmith carrying a small metal case. From the living room came Troy's voice, already rising, already brittle. "Don't open that damn door!" he shouted to Kendra, who hovered near the curtains. "They can't just waltz in here." But the knock came anyway, firm, professional, final. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house. "Mr. Mercer," the deputy called, "we're here under court order. You've been served notice. Today's the deadline." Kendra's voice trembled as she called back. "You can't do this. We just need a few more days." The deputy waited a moment, patient but unmoved. "Ma'am, you've had 30. Joanne rose from her chair and stepped into the hallway. She didn't say a word. Her expression was calm, almost detached, like someone watching a memory instead of living it. Troy stormed past her, throwing open the door so hard it smacked against the wall. "You think you can just take my home?" he yelled, face flushed with disbelief. "This is theft. You hear me? It's theft." The deputy didn't flinch. "Sir, this property belongs to Mrs. Joanne Mercer. You were informed of the vacate order. You're trespassing." "I'm her son. Doesn't change ownership." Troy's voice cracked. "You don't understand. This place is ours. My kids—" "Your kids," Joanne said quietly, "need a roof that doesn't come from a lie." He turned to her, eyes wild. "You really hate me that much?" "I don't hate you, Troy," she said, voice calm as the air before lightning. "I just finally stopped giving you everything." Kendra stepped forward, tears streaking her cheeks, clutching her phone like it could save her. "Joanne, please. We just need time. A week. The buyers can wait. They'll understand." Joanne didn't respond. She stood beside the counter, silent, watching the deputy gesture toward the locksmith. The man crouched at the front door, his tools clicking softly, the sound absurdly polite against the rising storm wind. Within seconds, the lock gave a low metallic sigh, and the knob turned. Kendra's sob broke the silence. Troy swore under his breath, pacing, fists clenched at his sides. The deputy handed him a folded paper. "You'll have the sheriff's escort to remove your belongings. 20 minutes, sir." "This is wrong," Troy muttered. "She's losing it. You'll see. Everyone will see." Joanne said nothing. Her eyes followed the locksmith as he replaced the knob with a new one, chrome gleaming under the gray morning light. Kendra stood frozen for a beat, then turned, darting down the hall. When she came back, she carried a single photo frame, one of the kids at last summer's fair. She clutched it to her chest, glaring through tears. "You'll regret this, Joanne. Someday you'll wish you'd shown mercy." Joanne's voice was almost kind. "Mercy's what got you this far." Outside, the first raindrops began to fall. Soft, slow, tapping against the porch roof. The deputy gestured gently toward the door. "Ma'am, it's time." Troy hesitated, staring at his mother one last time. Then he shoved past the deputy and stomped into the rain, muttering curses under his breath. Kendra followed, still clutching the photo, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. From the driveway, Rita Boone watched from her old pickup, hands wrapped tight around the steering wheel. She'd parked just far enough to keep from being seen, her face lined with a mix of pride and pity. The cafe apron still hung around her neck. She saw Joanne step out onto the porch as the locksmith turned the key in the new lock, heard the solid, unmistakable click of finality. When the deputies left, Joanne stayed where she was. Rain dampened her hair, her clothes, the wooden planks under her feet. Across the road, Troy's truck idled for a moment before pulling away, tires hissing on wet gravel. Rita rolled down her window and gave a single nod when Joanne glanced her way. No words, no wave, just understanding. The house behind Joanne seemed to exhale, the storm swallowing the sound. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, barely audible over the rain. One key left. And she slipped her hand into her pocket, feeling the cool ring of metal against her palm, the only set that still opened the farmhouse door. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the town washed clean and glistening. Puddles mirrored the courthouse clock tower as Joanne parked her truck outside Eli Drummond's real estate office, a modest brick building wedged between the post office and an old insurance agency. The sign on the door read, "Closed for private closing." Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and lemon oil. Papers were neatly stacked on the long wooden table, a pen placed dead center on the final page. Eli stood by the window, his tie slightly loosened, his smile tempered but proud. "Morning, Joe," he said, pulling out a chair. "You ready to make it official?" Joanne set her purse down and took a seat. Her reflection wavered in the cold, polished tabletop, lined face, steady eyes, no trace of doubt. "I've been ready," she said. The notary from the bank, a brisk woman in a navy blazer, slid the paperwork toward her. "This finalizes the sale," she said. "Once the wire clears, the funds move straight into your account." Joanne nodded, uncapping the pen. The tip scratched softly across the page, her name flowing for the last time beside the word seller. When she was done, she placed the pen neatly on the folder and folded her hands. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it," Eli confirmed. "The farmhouse is officially sold." For a moment, silence filled the room. Outside, a tractor rumbled down Main Street, its slow growl bleeding faintly through the glass. Joanne's heart didn't ache. It steadied. The weight she'd carried for months seemed to slide cleanly off her shoulders. The notary gathered the papers and offered a small, polite smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer." Eli grinned. "You're a free woman." Joanne managed a quiet laugh. "Took me long enough." At the First County Bank, the teller recognized her by name. "Good morning, Mrs. Mercer," she said, peering at her computer. "Wire just came through. Looks like everything cleared. That's quite the transfer." Joanne glanced at the screen but didn't react. "I'd like to move a portion into a new account," she said. "Call it the Wayne Mercer Memorial Fund." The teller blinked. "A memorial fund?" "For local farm girls," Joanne explained. "Scholarships, small equipment grants, maybe even seed money for new operations. Something that helps them start what they were told they couldn't." The teller smiled softly. "That's beautiful." Joanne nodded. He'd have liked that. While the teller typed, Joanne glanced out the window. Across the street, a mother walked her daughter into the feed store, the girl's braids swinging against a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. The sight made Joanne's chest tighten, just slightly. Not grief. Something quieter. Legacy. When the paperwork was done, she signed once more, collected her receipts, and left the bank with a lighter step than she'd had in years. By afternoon, Rita Boone was already in her kitchen, the smell of pecans and brown sugar filling every corner of the small house. When Joanne arrived, Rita pulled the pie from the oven, waving a dish towel at the smoke curling from the crust. "Don't just stand there," Rita said. "This is a two-fork situation." Joanne smiled and sat at the counter while Rita sliced it. still steaming, syrup glistening at the edges. You know, you didn't have to bake anything, Joanne said. Rita snorted. You sell your land for more than any of those good old boys thought you could. You get pie. It's the law. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that needed no filling. Outside, the clouds had broken completely, sunlight spilling through the window and catching the dust motes in a warm, golden haze. Finally, Rita leaned back, eyeing her friend. So what now? Joanne wiped her fork clean on a napkin. Now? I start over. Somewhere quiet. Maybe a condo in town? Rita teased. Get yourself a plant you don't have to water with a tractor? Joanne chuckled. Something like that. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number popped up. Kendra's cousin. This is Melissa. They don't have anywhere to go. Could you help with a few weeks' rent? Just until they get back on their feet? The message sat there, glowing faintly against the countertop. Rita saw it and frowned. Don't even think about it, she said. Joanne didn't. She reached for the phone, opened the message, and quietly hit delete. Then she picked up her fork again and took another bite of pie. Funny thing, she said after a moment. They always thought I'd break if I lost that farm. Rita smirked. And? Joanne met her gaze, eyes sharp, voice steady. Turns out I only started breathing when I let it go. They clinked their coffee mugs together in a quiet toast. Later that night, Joanne sat in her truck outside the feed store, watching the fields beyond the highway fade into dusk. The headlights from passing cars flickered across her windshield, painting her face in brief flashes of gold and shadow. Her phone buzzed again, a voicemail alert. She hesitated, then pressed play. Troy's voice, low and rough. I hope you're proud of yourself. A pause. You didn't just sell land, Mom. You sold me out. The message ended in silence. Joanne's reflection stared back at her in the glass, expression unreadable. She deleted it without a sound. As she started the truck, the glow from the feed store sign caught the silver edge of the check receipt sticking from her purse. Proof that every dollar had gone exactly where she wanted it. She smiled to herself, a quiet curve of satisfaction. Paid in full, she murmured. And with that, she drove off into the cooling Ohio twilight, the road ahead wide open and hers alone. The September wind carried the first hint of autumn as Joanne parked outside the Fairfield County 4-H office. The sky over Lancaster was a bright, endless blue, and the fields beyond the town shimmered with half-harvested corn. She stepped out of her truck holding a sealed envelope. Heavy, not with weight, but with meaning. Inside, the hum of conversation and the faint scent of hay mixed with the aroma of burnt coffee. The walls were covered with photos of county fair champions, smiling girls holding prize lambs, boys gripping blue ribbons, all glowing with the pride of beginnings. At the front desk, a young woman in a green 4-H polo looked up with a polite smile. Can I help you, ma'am? Joanne nodded, setting the envelope down carefully. You can. I'd like to make a donation. A fund, actually, for girls. High schoolers, trying to start in farming without family backing. I know what that looks like. The woman's brows lifted. That's incredible. How much should we? Joanne slid the paperwork across the counter, her voice steady. Enough to make sure no girl gets told you can't for at least the next 20 years. The woman blinked, speechless. Would you like to name it? Joanne hesitated, then smiled faintly. The Wayne Mercer Scholarship. He taught me how to build fences, balance a checkbook, and never wait for anyone's permission. That deserves remembering. When she left the office, the envelope and a piece of her past stayed behind. That afternoon, she met Eli at a modern condo complex on the edge of downtown Lancaster. Glass-fronted, freshly landscaped, clean lines, so different from the creaking beams and dust of the farmhouse. Eli held the door as she stepped into the unit. "I thought this one might suit you," he said. "Quiet building, view of the park, no acreage to worry about." Joanne walked through slowly. The air smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. She trailed her fingers across the smooth countertops, the balcony door, the light switch that clicked without protest. Everything in place, everything hers. "You don't miss the noise?" Eli asked. She glanced out the window, watching a dog walker pass below. "I had enough noise to last a lifetime." He smiled, folding his arms. "You did good, Joe. Most folks would have cracked under what you went through." Joanne turned back to him, a small wry smile tugging at her lips. Cracks let light in. Or so they say. That evening, as dusk settled over the town, Joanne sat cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by cardboard boxes. One was filled with kitchenware, another with books, another still with framed photos she hadn't looked at in years. Her phone buzzed beside her. A new email alert. From Troy Mercer. Subject, "You win." She hesitated, thumb hovering before she opened it. "Mom, I don't know what else to say. Kendra left last week. Took the kids to her sister's. Says she can't live with someone who can't provide. You sold the land. Fine. But you didn't just take a house from me. You took what I thought I'd become. I can't fix it. Maybe you don't care. But I hope one day you'll tell me how to start over, because I don't even know where to begin." Joanne stared at the message for a long moment, her eyes soft but unreadable. She tapped her finger once on the edge of the phone, then pressed delete. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. "Starting over's the part you earn." 2 days later, Rita arrived with a box of tools and a grin. "All right," she said, dropping the box onto the carpet. "Which wall gets the pictures and which gets the clock you hate but won't throw away?" Joanne laughed. "You're bossy for someone who can't hang a frame straight. That's why you're supervising." Together, they unpacked. The photo of Wayne in his overalls beside the tractor, the one of the old barn before the renovations, and finally a snapshot of the 2 women at the feed store cafe, laughing over pie. Rita hammered the last nail, stepped back, and crossed her arms. "Well, would you look at that? Looks like home already." Joanne took a slow breath. The condo smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil, new beginnings wrapped in the echo of the past. "Home," she echoed softly. "Yeah, maybe it does." They shared coffee on the balcony afterward, the hum of traffic below mixing with the chirp of evening crickets. Rita leaned her elbow on the railing. "Feels good, doesn't it? All wrapped up." Joanne smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Funny thing about endings, they never stick. The next morning, her phone rang. Marlene Clay, from the assessor's office. "Joanne, you sitting down?" Joanne frowned, settling into a kitchen chair. "I am now. What's going on?" Marlene's voice came through tight. "You remember that boy of yours? He was in here yesterday. Tried filing a quitclaim deed. Said you meant to correct ownership of the farm before the sale." Joanne's pulse slowed, the quiet fury rising like a tide. "He what?" "Tried to pass off a copy of the old deed, with his name typed in," Marlene said. "Thing is, the buyer already refiled the title. It's locked." "But I thought you should know." Joanne stared out the window. The morning light spilled across the countertop, catching on the edge of her coffee mug. "You did the right thing calling me." "Figured you'd want a heads up," Marlene said. "I'm flagging his name in the database. Any future filings from him go straight to the legal department." Joanne nodded, though Marlene couldn't see it. "Good. Let him try all he wants. The land doesn't belong to him anymore, and neither do I." When she hung up, the silence filled the condo again, but it didn't feel empty. It felt owned. She picked up the small frame of the farmhouse, the one she'd almost left boxed, and set it on the windowsill. Outside, the sun crept higher, bright and defiant. Joanne sipped her coffee and whispered, "You can't fake what you never earned." The city below went on as if nothing had happened, but for Joanne Mercer, another line had just been drawn. The next morning broke clear and cold, the kind of crisp Ohio morning that sharpened every sound. The thrum of tires on pavement, the whistle of wind past storefronts, the hollow echo of church bells in the distance. Joanne Mercer parked outside the Fairfield County Assessor's office once again, the same building where this war had quietly begun. She carried a slim folder under her arm. Every document, every receipt, every notarized signature that proved beyond argument what was hers and what wasn't. The sunlight glinted off her truck mirror as she locked the door behind her, her reflection steady and composed. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the same smell of toner and burnt coffee clung to the air. Marlene Clay looked up from behind the counter, recognition flickering into something like relief. "Well, well," Marlene said, pulling her glasses down to her nose. "I was just about to call you. Figured you'd want to finish what your son started." Joanne's mouth curved faintly. "That's why I'm here." Marlene gestured for her to come around to the desk. "Bring what you've got." Joanne laid the folder down. Inside, the finalized deed transfer, the confirmation from the bank, the buyer's certification, and the flagged quitclaim attempt, all neatly labeled. Marlene opened the folder like a priest opening a hymnal. "Looks like he typed his name right over yours," she said, shaking her head. "Didn't even bother changing the date stamp. Amateurs make my job easy." Joanne said nothing, just watched as Marlene logged into the county database. The monitor reflected faintly in Marlene's glasses as she scrolled. "Let's see, parcel 5208. The screen populated with text. Marlene clicked, adjusted her glasses again, then smiled. A thin, satisfied smile. "Yep, title's locked under the buyer's name. No liens, no disputes. And now," she typed quickly, the keyboard clacking like small hammers. "His name is permanently flagged. Any filing attempt from him, any name variation, comes straight to my desk. No one tampers with this property again." Joanne exhaled slowly. The knot that had sat in her chest for weeks loosened by another thread. "Thank you, Marlene," she said softly. "You've done me a kindness." Marlene leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I'd call it justice. Folks around here think property's about dirt and boards. It's not. It's about what you've built and who had the spine to keep it standing." Joanne smiled at that, genuine and small. "Guess I just proved I still have one." "You always did," Marlene said. "You just stopped apologizing for it." Outside, the wind had picked up. Joanne zipped her jacket and stepped into the bright sunlight. The courthouse square buzzed faintly with life. Farm trucks parked along the curb, people drifting in and out of the diner across the street. Across from the assessor's office, Eli Drummond leaned against his pickup, waving her over with 2 steaming paper cups in hand. "Coffee," he said as she approached. "And before you ask, yes, it's the good kind, not whatever Rita brews in that diesel tank she calls a pot." Joanne accepted the cup, the heat seeping into her fingers. "I was about to say, this smells halfway civilized." He grinned. "So? How bad was it?" She took a sip, savoring it before answering. "Not bad at all." Marlene fixed the record, flagged his name. "Everything's airtight now. He can't touch it again." Eli nodded, relief softening the lines on his face. "Good. I figured he'd take another swing. Pride like his doesn't die easy." "It'll have to," she said simply. They stood for a while on the courthouse steps, the wind tugging at the corners of their jackets. The morning had a strange stillness, like the town itself was finally exhaling. Eli tilted his head toward the diner. "What do you say we celebrate?" "My treat. Pancakes, bacon, the works. You've earned it." Joanne smiled, her gaze drifting past him to the courthouse lawn where leaves had begun to scatter in the wind. "Rain check," she said. "I think I'd rather just enjoy the quiet today." "Fair enough," Eli said. He hesitated, then added, "You know, I'll miss that old farmhouse. Buyers already started moving equipment in. Marlene mentioned they're repurposing it." Joanne's eyes flicked up. "Repurposing?" He nodded. "Yeah." She said the buyers are turning it into something called Future Farmers Cooperative, training center for young agi entrepreneurs, teaching kids how to run small operations without getting swallowed by the big players. Joanne blinked. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then her lips parted in a quiet, astonished laugh. "Of course they are." "Good use for the place, huh?" Eli said, smiling. "The best," she said, voice low. "Wayne would have liked that." She looked past Eli toward the horizon, the long road that stretched back to the land she'd fought to keep, then chosen to let go. The farmhouse she'd turned into both battleground and testament. For the first time, thinking of it didn't ache. It felt finished. Eli tipped his cup toward her. "To peace, then?" She raised her cup to meet his. "To peace. And purpose." He chuckled. "Now that's a Mercer toast if I ever heard one." They stood there a moment longer, two old friends in the cool sunlight, steam curling from their cups. When Eli finally walked away, Joanne lingered on the steps. She pulled her jacket tighter against the breeze, her smile small but certain. Then, with a glance toward the courthouse door, she whispered to herself, "They tried to take it. But they never really had it." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. One final notification from the county portal. Record update complete. Property ownership. Locked. She read it once, then tucked the phone away. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from somewhere down the square, like the earth itself had turned a page. Joanne Mercer walked to her truck, the sound of her boots shore against the concrete. The fight was over. But what grew next, she realized, might just be the truest harvest of her life. The drive out to County Road 11 was quiet, the kind of stillness that belonged only to early autumn. The fields on either side of the highway had turned from green to gold, rows of harvested corn standing like ghosts of the summer gone by. Joanne's truck hummed along the familiar route, her fingers loose on the steering wheel, her window cracked just enough to let in the smell of cut hay and distant rain. As she crested the last hill, the farmhouse came into view. The white paint fresh, the porch rails straightened, the sagging barn now standing proud under a new red roof. A weathered sign leaned against the fence, half covered in a tarp. Someone was working there. She slowed to a crawl. A group of teenagers knelt in the front yard, soil-stained gloves and shovels in hand, laughter carrying faintly over the hum of crickets. They were planting seedlings, young trees in neat rows along the drive, each tagged with a plastic ribbon. A teacher or supervisor stood nearby, clipboard tucked under one arm, gesturing as he spoke. Joanne pulled off to the shoulder, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment just watching. Her heart tugged somewhere deep, an ache of nostalgia that felt gentler now, like a bruise that had healed but remembered its lesson. The farmhouse door opened and she saw a woman she didn't recognize, probably one of the new coordinators, handing out bottled water to the kids. The woman's laughter rang through the air, clear and easy. For the first time in a long while, the house looked alive for the right reasons. Joanne got out of the truck, the gravel crunching softly beneath her boots. One of the teens noticed her, a freckled girl with her hair tucked into a ball cap. "Morning, ma'am," the girl called cheerfully. "You here for the program?" Joanne smiled, shaking her head. "No, just passing through." The girl nodded and went back to her shovel, humming under her breath. The sound mingled with the rustle of leaves and the scrape of metal in soil, a new rhythm for the land she once ruled in silence. At the edge of the yard, a new sign stood half unveiled where the old Mercer farm placard used to hang. The paint gleamed under the sun. Future Farmers of Hope. Teaching tomorrow's growers today. She stepped closer, her reflection faint in the polished surface. The words stirred something in her chest. A quiet pride that didn't belong to ownership but to legacy. From down the road, a car horn tooted twice. Joanne turned to see Rita Boone's old Chevy idling in front of the cafe porch across the lane. Rita was waving a mason jar from her driver's side window. "Sweet tea," she shouted. "Don't you dare leave before I guilt you into one more cup." Joanne laughed despite herself and crossed the street. The cafe was busy for a weekday afternoon. Farmhands at the counter, a couple of students hunched over laptops, and the smell of pecan pie wafting through the open door. Rita poured 2 glasses of tea, condensation beading on the sides, and handed one over. "Figured you'd come out here eventually. Can't resist your own handiwork." Joanne took a sip, the cold sweetness cutting through the warm air. "Didn't think I'd see it like this," she said. "Feels strange." "Good strange or bad strange?" "Good," Joanne said after a moment. "The kind that makes the world feel like it figured itself out without me." Rita leaned on the counter, squinting out toward the farm. "You know, I talked to the woman running the program. Says they're partnering with the high school, teaching kids sustainable crops, soil management, all that fancy stuff. Told me they're dedicating a scholarship in your name." Joanne blinked. "Mine?" "Yep." Said it was the buyer's idea. The Joanne Mercer Fellowship for Rural Renewal. Rita grinned. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Joanne chuckled softly. "Never thought I'd be the kind of woman who ends up on a plaque." Rita handed her a napkin, smirking. "Well, you earned it. And unlike some folks, you didn't have to fake your name to get it." Joanne laughed then. Real, unguarded laughter that startled even her. She turned her gaze back toward the farmhouse across the road. The sun had dipped low, bathing the fields in amber light. The seedlings cast long shadows, small and uncertain, but alive. For years, that land had felt like a battle she was doomed to fight. Now, watching strangers tend it with love and purpose, she realized it was never meant to stay hers. It was meant to keep growing. Rita nudged her elbow. "You look lighter." Joanne nodded. "I feel lighter." They stood in silence for a while, sipping tea as the day began to fade. The sound of laughter floated from the farm, carried by the wind. When Joanne finally turned to go, she paused at the cafe steps and looked back one last time. The farmhouse windows glowed with the last of the sunset, the fields behind it rippling gold like an ocean. She took a deep breath, the scent of earth and sweet tea mingling in the air, and whispered to herself, softly, but with the weight of truth that only freedom could bring. "He tried to take my land, but I sold it, kept my peace, and grew something better." And with that, Joanne Mercer walked toward her truck, the wind tugging at her hair, the horizon wide and welcoming.